We left Amora traveling north, thinking she was finally safe in the arms of her twin alphas. But in the Blood Moon Citadel, the danger isn't chasing her anymore. It's waiting for her behind the gates. In this final installment, Amora faces the ultimate betrayal. She is drugged, dumped in the frozen wastes, and left to die by General Falk and the jealous Ravenna. But they made a fatal mistake. They thought they were burying a stray human. But they were waking up the Silver Wolf. From the terrifying trials of the Council to the rise of the exiles led by Reyes, this is the explosive conclusion where Amora stops running and starts ruling. But wait. If you're wondering how a runaway waitress ended up with the ruthless twin alphas in the first place, or what the breeder's mark actually is, you are missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Make sure you pause this video and click the link in the description to listen to part 1 first. You need to see where her journey began to understand just how powerful she becomes in this finale. Now, let's head to the Frozen North, the Frozen Kingdom. Chapter 1. The Border of Ice and Blood. The silence inside the luxury sedan was heavy, but it wasn't the comfortable silence of peace. It was the suffocating quiet of a deep breath taken before a plunge. The city lights had long since faded into the rearview mirror, replaced by the encroaching darkness of the dense northern forests. The rain that had washed away the blood in the alleyway had turned into sleet, and now, as the elevation climbed, it was transforming into a thick, driving snow. Amora sat in the back seat. Her hand still gripped tightly in Velkin's. His thumb rubbed the back of her knuckles in a rhythmic, soothing motion, but she could feel the tension radiating off him. It wasn't fear. Velkin didn't do fear. It was alert, coiled aggression. In the driver's seat, Bardolph's eyes flicked constantly to the mirrors, his jaw set in a hard line. The heater hummed, fighting the drop in temperature, but a chill that had nothing to do with the weather was seeping into Amora's bones. "You're quiet," Velkin murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the leather seat. He didn't look at her. His golden-flecked eyes were scanning the tree line, watching for threats in the shadows. "I'm thinking about what you said," Amora admitted, her voice sounding small in the plush interior. "About being a queen. I've spent 3 years scrubbing grease off plates and hiding in basements. I don't know how to rule a pack. I don't even know how to be a wolf anymore." Bardolph spoke from the front, his tone sharp but not unkind. "You survived Tidwolf's hunters for 3 years alone in a human city. Most alphas wouldn't have lasted 3 months without a pack. You have the instincts, Amora. The rest is just politics." "Politics can be deadlier than claws," Velkin added darkly. "But you won't be doing it alone. The North is different from the Silverclaw territory. We value strength, yes, but we value loyalty more. Once they see you, once they smell the bond on you, they will kneel." Amora wanted to believe him. She wanted to sink into the safety of his confidence, but the knot in her stomach was tightening. As the car crested a massive ridge, the headlights illuminated a sprawling valley below. It was a landscape of harsh, breathtaking beauty. Jagged peaks pierced the sky like broken teeth, and nestled at the base of the largest mountain was a fortress of dark stone and timber, glowing with the light of 1,000 torches. "The Blood Moon Citadel," Bardolph announced, a note of pride entering his voice. "Home." But before Amora could process the sheer scale of the place, the car slammed on its brakes. The tires screeched on the icy asphalt, the anti-lock system engaging with a mechanical stutter as the vehicle skidded to a halt just inches from a heavy steel barricade that blocked the road. "What is this?" Amora gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. "Stay in the car," Velkin ordered, his voice dropping into the alpha command tone. He released her hand and opened his door before the car had even fully stopped rocking. Outside, The wind howled, whipping snow into a frenzy. Through the windshield, Amora saw 6 massive wolves step out from the tree line. They weren't shifting. They were already in their beast forms. Massive timber wolves with gray and white fur, snarling and snapping at the air. Behind them stood a man in tactical gear, holding a heavy assault rifle across his chest. He was tall, with a scar running through his left eyebrow and an expression of stone-cold indifference. This was General Falk. Amora recognized the description from the whispers in the underground. The twins' right hand, the executioner of the North. Velkin marched toward the barricade, ignoring the weapon pointed at his chest. Bardolph was out of the car a second later, flanking his brother. The 2 alphas didn't shift, but their presence was so overwhelming that the timber wolves whined and lowered their bellies to the snow. "Open the gate, Falk!" Velkin roared over the wind, his voice echoing off the valley walls. "Do you not recognize your own alpha?" Falk didn't flinch. He didn't lower the gun. He looked from Velkin to Bardolph, and then his gaze drifted to the car, locking onto Amora through the windshield. His eyes were cold, calculating, and devoid of any submission. "I recognize my alphas," Falk shouted back, his voice rough as gravel. "But I also smell the stench of the silver claw in your vehicle. And I smell a stray." "She is not a stray," Bardolph snarled, stepping forward, his hands curling into fists. "She is the mate. Open the gate, or I will paint the snow with your blood." Falk smirked, a dangerous, insolent expression. "Protocol, Alpha. We are at war. No one enters the Citadel without a blood vetting, not even a mate, especially not one who smells like she's been rolling in human filth for 3 years. He raised his hand, and the timber wolves rose from their submissive crouch, their hackles raising. They weren't attacking the twins. They were moving to surround the car. Amora watched in horror as the wolves circled her sanctuary. Falk wasn't just a guard doing his duty. This was a power play. He was challenging the twins' judgment in front of the pack. And if the twins attacked their own general to get her in, it would look like weakness. It would look like they were choosing a female over the safety of the stronghold. Velkin turned back to look at her, conflict raging in his eyes. But before he could make a move, Falk racked the slide of his rifle. "Step away from the vehicle, Alphas," Falk commanded. "We need to see if the bitch carries the madness virus before we let her into the heart of the North." Chapter 2. The Coldest Welcome. The insult hung in the freezing air, sharp enough to cut glass. Madness virus. It was a slur used against rogues, a way of saying she was tainted, unclean. Amora felt the shame burn through her cheeks, hot and humiliating. But beneath the shame, a spark of anger ignited. She had survived Tidwolf. She had survived the city. She would not be cowed by a glorified doorman. Inside the car, Amora made a decision. She didn't wait for the twins to defend her. She didn't wait for Falk to drag her out. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The wind biting through the thin fabric of her waitress uniform and the oversized suit jacket Velkin had given her. Snow instantly matted in her hair, but she stood tall. She stepped out onto the icy road, her boots crunching on the packed snow. "Amora, get back in the car!" Bardolph shouted, spinning around, his eyes wide with alarm. "No," Amora said, her voice trembling slightly but loud enough to be heard. She walked past the twins, ignoring their attempts to grab her, and stopped 3 feet from General Falk. She forced herself to look him in the eye, channeling every ounce of defiance she had left. "You want to check my blood? Check it." Falk blinked, surprised by her audacity. He lowered the rifle slightly, his nose twitching as he took in her scent. The vanilla, the rain, and beneath it, the undeniable power of the alpha bond. "You have spirit, girl," Falk sneered, stepping closer until he towered over her. "But spirit doesn't prove loyalty." He pulled a jagged obsidian dagger from his belt. It was a ceremonial blade, used for blood oaths. Without warning, he reached out and grabbed Amora's wrist. Velkin let out a roar of pure fury and lunged, but Bardolph held him back, whispering something urgent in his ear. They had to let this happen. If they stopped it, the pack would doubt her forever. Falk sliced the blade across Amora's palm. It stung, a sharp bite of pain, but she didn't flinch. He held her hand over a patch of pristine white snow, letting the bright red drops fall. 1, 2, 3. The blood hit the snow and sizzled, steaming in the cold air. It didn't turn black. It remained a vibrant, healthy crimson. "Clean," Falk grunted. Sounding almost disappointed, he released her hand roughly. "Open the gate." The heavy steel barricade began to groan and slide open. The timber wolves retreated into the shadows, their eyes still fixed on Amora with predatory curiosity. Velkin was at her side in an instant, wrapping his arms around her and burying his face in her neck, inhaling deeply to calm his raging wolf. "You shouldn't have done that," Velkin whispered, his voice thick with suppressed violence. "I would have torn his throat out." "And started a civil war on your doorstep?" Amora replied, her teeth chattering as the adrenaline faded. "I can bleed, Velkin. I've been bleeding for years. A few drops won't kill me." They drove through the gates and up the winding road to the citadel. Up close, the fortress was even more imposing. It was a sprawling complex of black stone, built into the living rock of the mountain, banners bearing the blood moon crest, a crimson wolf howling at a silver moon, snapped in the gale. They parked in a massive courtyard paved with cobblestones. Dozens of pack members were gathered there, silent and watchful. They weren't cheering. They stood in tight clusters, wrapped in furs and wool, watching the Alpha's car with suspicion. As Amora stepped out, flanked by the twins, the crowd parted. An elderly woman walked forward. She was tiny, withered with age, leaning on a staff made of white weirwood, but her eyes were sharp as flint, and the power radiating off her was ancient and suffocating. This was Elder Skara, the matriarch of the Blood Moon, the woman who had raised the twins when their parents died. Velkin and Bardolph bowed their heads slightly, a sign of deep respect. "Grandmother," Bardolph said, "we have returned, and we have brought our mate." Skara didn't look at her grandsons. Her gaze was fixed entirely on Amora. She walked a slow circle around the girl, sniffing the air, her face twisted in a scowl. She poked Amora's leg with her staff, as if testing the quality of livestock. "She is thin," Skara croaked, her voice like dry leaves. "She smells of fear and city grease, and she carries the trauma of the Silver Claw." "She carries our mark on her soul," Velkin argued, stepping between Amora and the old woman. "She is the one." "Fate is a suggestion, not a law," Skara snapped, striking her staff against the stones. "The pack needs a queen who can hunt, who can lead, who can bear strong heirs. This is a broken bird." "We will heal her," Bardolph said firmly. "Perhaps," Skara mused, her eyes narrowing. "Or perhaps she will break the moment the winter truly sets in." She turned her back on them, addressing the guards. "Take the twins to the war room. The council is waiting to discuss the fallout of Tidwolf's death. You have a war to plan." "We aren't leaving her," Velkin growled. "You are alphas," Skara shouted, spinning around with surprising ferocity. "Duty comes before desire. You will secure the pack's safety first." She pointed a gnarled finger at Amora. "The girl goes to the West Tower. She will be bathed, fed, and kept out of sight until I decide what to do with her." "She is not a prisoner," Bardolph warned, his voice low. "In this castle, everyone is a prisoner of their station," Skara replied coldly. "Take her away." Two stone-faced female guards stepped forward, grabbing Amora by the arms. Amora looked at the twins, panic flaring in her chest. "Go," Amora whispered to them, trying to be brave. "I'll be fine. Go handle the war." Velkin looked like he was being torn apart, but he nodded once. "We will come for you tonight, I promise." As the twins were led away toward the main keep, and Amora was dragged toward the dark, looming spire of the West Tower, she realized that the danger hadn't ended in the alleyway. It had just changed shape. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage. The West Tower was less a guest wing, and more a fortress within a fortress. The room Amora was shoved into was opulent, filled with heavy velvet drapes, a 4-poster bed large enough to sleep 6, and a roaring fireplace that took up half the wall. But the door was heavy oak reinforced with iron bands, and the moment the guards left, Amora heard the distinct, heavy clunk of a deadbolt sliding home from the outside. She rushed to the door, pounding on it with her fist. "Hey, you can't lock me in here. I'm the Alpha's mate." "Matriarch's orders," a muffled voice replied from the hallway. "Rest, girl. You'll need it." Amora slumped against the door, sliding down until she hit the cold stone floor. The adrenaline of the arrival was crashing, leaving her exhausted and trembling. She looked around the room. It was beautiful, warm, and smelled of lavender and cedar, but it was a cage. Just a prettier version of the life she had run from. "I won't do this again," she whispered to the empty room. "I won't be a prisoner." She pushed herself up and went to the window. It was a narrow slit in the stone, no glass, just a shutter. She pushed it open and looked down. A sheer drop of 300 feet into a ravine filled with jagged rocks and rushing black water greeted her. There was no climbing down. "Looking for an exit?" Amora spun around, a gasp catching in her throat. She hadn't heard anyone enter. Standing in the shadows of the corner, near a small service door blended into the paneling, was a young woman. She was dressed in the gray wool uniform of a servant, holding a basin of steaming water and a stack of towels. She looked terrified. Her hands were shaking so hard the water was rippling in the bowl. "Who are you?" Amora asked, backing away toward the fireplace, her hand searching for a poker or a heavy object. I'm Varel," the girl stammered, dropping into a clumsy curtsy. "I'm to be your handmaiden. The matriarch sent me to wash the city off you." Amora relaxed slightly. Varel smelled of fear and chamomile, a beta wolf, low in the hierarchy, utterly harmless. "I don't need a handmaiden," Amora said softly. "I need to know what's going on. Why does everyone look at me like I'm a disease?" Varel set the basin down on a vanity table and began wringing out a cloth, refusing to meet Amora's eyes. "It's not you, my lady. It's the prophecy, and her." "Her?" Amora stepped closer. "Who is her?" Varel froze, her eyes darting to the locked door. She hurried over to Amora, lowering her voice to a barely audible whisper. "Lady Ravenna, General Falk's daughter. She has been courting the twins for 5 years. Everyone expected her to be the Luna. She is strong. She is a warrior. The pack loves her." Amora felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Of course, 2 powerful, handsome alphas wouldn't have been single by accident. There was an expectant queen already in residence. Do the twins love her?" Amora asked, the insecurity gnawing at her. "They respect her," Varel said diplomatically. "But they never claimed her. That is why she hates you. You walked in from the streets and took what she has spent a lifetime training for. Varel reached into her apron and pulled out a small folded piece of parchment. She pressed it into Amora's hand, her eyes wide with terror. She told me to give you this, Varel whispered. She said if I didn't, she would have my father exiled to the wastelands. Amora unfolded the paper. It wasn't a threat scrawled in blood. It was far more insidious. It was a drawing. A detailed charcoal sketch of a wolf, Amora's wolf, lying dead in the snow, with an arrow through its eye. Beneath the drawing, in elegant, cursive script, were 3 words: "Winter kills the weak." She controls the guards on this floor, Varel warned, backing away toward the service door. She controls the kitchens. Be careful what you eat. Be careful where you step. You are safe from the twins, my lady. But in here, with the matriarch and Ravenna, you are prey. Before Amora could ask more, Varel slipped through the hidden panel in the wall and vanished, leaving Amora alone with the roaring fire and the terrifying realization that she was locked in a tower with a rival who wanted her dead. And then, the lock on the main door clicked. Chapter 4. The Banquet of Vipers. The door swung open, revealing 2 guards, not the ones from before, but new ones wearing red armbands. "Dinner," the lead guard grunted. "The matriarch demands your presence in the great hall." Amora looked down at her stained waitress uniform, the fabric stiff with dried mud and sweat. "I can't go like this." "You go as you are," the guard sneered. "Let the pack see what their alphas dragged in." They didn't give her a choice. They escorted her, marched her, really, down the winding stone stairs, through drafty corridors lined with tapestries depicting violent battles, and into the great hall. The room was cavernous. A fire pit the size of a small house roared in the center, casting long, dancing shadows against the high vaulted ceiling. Long tables were arranged in a U-shape, packed with hundreds of wolves. The air was thick with the smell of roasted meat, ale, and the musk of 1,000 shifters. At the head table, on a raised dais, sat Elder Skara. To her right sat Velkin and Bardolph. They looked regal, having washed and changed into black formal tunics embroidered with silver thread. They looked like kings. And to their left sat a woman who could only be Ravenna. She was stunning. Tall, with hair like spun platinum and eyes of piercing ice blue. She wore a gown of deep crimson velvet that hugged every curve of her warrior's body. She looked powerful, poised, and utterly at home. When Amora walked in, the room went silent. The chatter died instantly. Hundreds of eyes turned to her. She felt small. She felt dirty. She was still wearing her grease-stained uniform and Velkin's oversized jacket, her hair a tangled mess. She looked like a beggar who had stumbled into a royal court. Velkin and Bardolph stood up immediately, their chairs scraping against the stone. Their eyes locked onto her, filled with worry and anger as they took in her appearance. They hadn't known she hadn't been allowed to change. "Amora!" Bardolph called out, starting to move around the table. "Sit down, Alpha!" Skara barked. "Let her walk. Let her stand before the pack." Amora lifted her chin. She remembered the alleyway. She remembered the feeling of the wolf purring in her chest. "I am not a beggar," she told herself. "I am the one they chased." She walked down the center aisle, her boots echoing in the silence. She stopped at the base of the dais, refusing to bow. "You summoned me," Amora said, her voice steady. Ravenna laughed. It was a light, musical sound that carried to every corner of the room. "We summoned the mate," Ravenna corrected, standing up and gliding down the stairs to stand toe-to-toe with Amora. Up close, she smelled of winter roses and arsenic. "But it seems the twins brought us a charity case instead." She circled Amora, wrinkling her nose. Tell me, little stray, do you even know which fork to use? Do you know the history of the Northern Wars? Do you know how to skin a stag in the dead of winter? I know how to survive, Amora replied, meeting Ravenna's icy gaze. I survived the city. I survived Tidwolf. That's more than you can say from your velvet chair. A ripple of shock went through the room. No one spoke to Ravenna like that. Ravenna's smile vanished. Her eyes flashed a dangerous, wolfish blue. Survival is for rats, she hissed, low enough that only Amora and the dais could hear. Queens do not survive. They rule. And look at you. You are weak. Your wolf is dormant. You can't even shift, can you? Amora froze. It was true. Her wolf was awake, but the trauma and the suppressants had made shifting impossible for years. She hadn't shifted in the alley. She hadn't shifted in the car. I thought so, Ravenna announced, turning to the crowd, raising her voice. Brothers and sisters of the blood moon, is this who we bow to? A wolf who cannot wear her own skin? A human in spirit, if not in blood? She is our mate, Velkin roared, leaping over the table, landing on the floor with a heavy thud. He shoved Ravenna back, placing himself between the two women. The hall gasped. One more word, Ravenna, and I will forget that your father is my general. It is a valid question, Velkin, Skara said from her throne, her voice cutting through the tension. A queen who cannot shift cannot lead the hunt. If she cannot lead the hunt, she weakens the pack. And winter is coming. We cannot afford weakness. Amora looked at Velkin's back. He was shaking with rage, ready to fight his own family for her. But she realized with a sinking heart that violence wouldn't win this. They didn't doubt his strength. They doubted hers. What do you want? Amora asked, stepping out from behind Velkin. How do I prove it? Ravenna smiled, a cruel, predatory curving of red lips. There is only one way to prove a stranger is worthy of the Alpha bloodline. She looked at Skara, and the matriarch nodded slowly. The Moonlight Trial, Skara decreed. Chapter 5. The Council's Decree. The words, Moonlight Trial, sucked the oxygen out of the room. Even the rowdiest wolves at the back tables went pale. Velkin and Bardolph went rigid. No, Bardolph said, stepping down from the dais to join them. That is an archaic ritual. It hasn't been used in a century. It is a death sentence. It is the law! General Falk shouted from a nearby table, slamming his fist down. If she wants to be Luna, if she wants to command my soldiers, she must prove she is favored by the moon goddess. Unless you are afraid she will fail? We are afraid she will die, Velkin snarled. The trial is designed for warriors born in the snow, not for someone who has been starved and suppressed for years. Then she is not worthy, Ravenna said simply, shrugging her elegant shoulders. If the moon goddess chose her, the goddess will protect her. If she dies, well, then it was a mistake of nature, and you are free to choose a proper mate. She looked pointedly at herself. Amora looked between the twins. They were terrified. For the first time since she met them, she saw genuine fear in their eyes. This wasn't a fight they could punch their way out of. This was deep, ancient pack magic. What is the trial? Amora asked quietly. 3 tasks, Bardolph explained, his voice tight. First, the trial of ice, survival in the frozen wastes without supplies. Second, the trial of blood, a hunt against a beast of the council's choosing. And third, the trial of the mind. She will do it, Skara stated. Or she will leave this territory by sunrise and never return. The blood moon does not harbor freeloaders. Velkin turned to Amora, grabbing her shoulders. Refuse, he whispered urgently. Tell them no. We will leave. We will take the car and go. We don't need the pack. I won't watch you die." Amora looked at him. She saw the desperation, the love. He was willing to give up his birthright, his army, his home, just to keep her safe. He would become a rogue for her. But if they left, Ravenna would win. Falk would win. The twins would be exiles, hunted by their own people, and eventually, the Silver Claw remnants would find them. Running had been her life for 3 years. She was done running. She looked at Ravenna, who was watching her with a smug expression. She looked at Skara, who watched with cold indifference. Amora stepped back from Velkin. She took a deep breath, smelling the wood smoke and the challenge in the air. "I accept," Amora said, her voice ringing clear through the hall. Velkin closed his eyes, looking pained. Ravenna's smile widened into something wolfish and hungry. "Excellent," Skara said, standing up. "The trial begins at dawn. Tonight she stays in the tower, alone. No alphas, no help." "That is a death sentence in itself," Bardolph argued. "She is vulnerable." "Then she better pray," Skara said. "Guards, take her back." As the guards grabbed her arms again, Amora looked back at the twins one last time. They looked ready to shift and tear the hall apart, but they were bound by the ancient laws they had sworn to uphold. They were kings, but tonight, they were powerless. Chapter 6. Shadows in the Room. The walk back to the tower felt like a funeral procession. The guards threw Amora into the room and slammed the bolt home with a finality that echoed in her chest. The fire had burned down to embers. The room was cold. Amora didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She paced. The anger she had felt in the hall was hardening into something cold and sharp. "They want me to die," she thought. "They think I'm weak. I'll show them." She went to the vanity and washed the dirt from her face with the cold water left by Varel. She stripped off the ruined uniform and found a simple nightgown in the wardrobe. She needed to rest. She needed to be ready for dawn. But sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an assassin. Every whistle of the wind sounded like an arrow. Hours passed. The moon climbed high in the sky, casting a pale silver light through the slit window. Suddenly, a soft scrape came from the balcony. Amora grabbed a heavy brass candlestick and pressed herself against the wall. The balcony was 300 feet up. Nothing could climb that. The shutter latch jiggled. Then, a blade slid through the crack and lifted the latch. The window swung open. Amora raised the candlestick, ready to swing. A dark shape tumbled into the room, bringing a gust of snow and freezing air with it. The figure stood up, brushing snow off black tactical gear. "Don't swing, little wolf," a familiar voice whispered. "Velkin?" Amora lowered the weapon, her heart hammering. He pulled off his mask. It was him. His hair was windblown, his face red from the cold. He had climbed the sheer face of the tower in the middle of a blizzard. "You're insane," she breathed, rushing to him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet and burying his face in her neck. He felt like a block of ice, but his hold was desperate, possessive. "I told you I wouldn't leave you," he growled. "Rules be damned. I'm not letting you spend the night before your execution alone." "It's not an execution," Amora said, pulling back to look at him. "I can do this." "You don't know what the waste is like, Amora," Velkin said, his eyes haunted. "The cold, it gets inside your mind. It makes you want to sleep. And if you sleep, you don't wake up." He walked her to the bed and sat down, pulling her onto his lap. He didn't try to undress her. He just held her, wrapping his massive frame around her like a shield. "Bardolph is guarding the corridor," Velkin explained. "He's dealing with the guards. We have a plan. We can drug the guards, get to the car." "No," Amora stopped him, placing a hand on his chest. Velkin, listen to me. If we run, we lose. Ravenna wins. You lose your pack. I won't be the reason you lose your birthright. You are my birthright, Velkin whispered fiercely. The pack means nothing without you. Then let me win it for you, Amora said. Let me prove I belong here. Help me. Tell me how to survive the cold. Velkin looked at her for a long time, searching her eyes. He saw the resolve there. He sighed, defeated but proud. Body heat, Velkin said. And movement. Never stop moving. If you stop, dig into the snow, not on top of it. And Amora, trust your wolf. She knows the north, even if you don't. He kissed her then. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, searing claim. It was a transfer of energy, of will. For a moment, the world outside, the snow, the trials, the hate, didn't exist. There was only the fire of the bond. But the moment was shattered by a sound that chilled them both to the bone. From the hallway outside the heavy oak door came the sound of a scuffle, a thud, the sound of a body hitting the floor. And then, silence. Bardolph! Velkin hissed. His eyes flashing gold, he stood up, pushing Amora behind him, facing the door. The handle turned slowly. The lock clicked, not from a key, but picked. The door creaked open. It wasn't Bardolph standing there. It wasn't a guard. It was a figure cloaked entirely in white furs, wearing a mask made from the skull of a stag. In their hand, they held a blown glass sphere filled with a swirling purple gas. The trial begins early, the figure whispered. The voice was distorted, impossible to identify. Before Velkin could lunge, the figure threw the sphere into the room. It shattered on the floor, releasing a thick purple cloud that expanded instantly. Breath! Velkin shouted, trying to cover Amora's face with his hand, but it was too late. Amora inhaled the sweet, sickly scent. The world tilted. Her legs turned to water. She saw Velkin stumble, roaring in confusion, clawing at the air as he fell to his knees. The last thing Amora saw before the darkness took her was the figure in the stag mask stepping over Velkin's collapsed body, coming toward her with a length of rope. The trial had begun, and someone was making sure she wouldn't even make it to the starting line. Chapter 7. The White Grave. Consciousness returned to Amora not with a gasp, but with a shudder that rattled her very teeth. There was no soft mattress beneath her. No warm fire crackling in the hearth. No cedar-scented alpha holding her close. There was only ice. Unforgiving, rock-hard ice covered in a layer of powder that burned her skin like acid. Amora pushed herself up, her limbs heavy and uncooperative. The drug, the purple gas from the glass sphere, still coated the back of her throat with a sickly sweet taste. Her head swam, vision blurring as she tried to focus on her surroundings. She was no longer in the West Tower. She wasn't even in the Citadel. She was in a white void. The landscape was a nightmare of grays and whites. Huge, jagged pines groaned under the weight of snow, their branches looking like skeletal arms reaching for her. The wind howled through the valley, carrying needles of ice that stung her face. It was the frozen wastes, the uninhabitable dead zone north of the Packlands. Velkin, she rasped, her voice swallowed instantly by the gale. Bardolph? Silence answered her. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the drug-induced haze. She remembered the figure in the stag mask. She remembered Velkin falling, clawing at his throat. Was he dead? Had they killed the alphas to get to her? She scrambled to her feet, swaying dizzily. She looked down at herself. She was wearing only the thin cotton nightgown she had put on in the tower. No coat, no boots. Her bare feet were already turning a waxy blue against the snow. They didn't kill me, Amora whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. They dumped me. It was a rigged game. The trial of ice was supposed to be about survival, yes, but usually, the initiate started with basic supplies: a knife, flint, furs. Whoever had taken her had stripped her of everything. They hadn't sent her here to be tested. They had sent her here to freeze to death before the sun even fully rose. She hugged her arms around her chest, her teeth chattering so violently she bit her tongue. The cold was a living thing here. It was an apex predator, and it was already eating her alive. She had minutes, maybe less, before hypothermia shut her organs down. Move, Velkin's voice echoed in her memory. Never stop moving. Dig into the snow. Amora forced one foot in front of the other. The snow was thigh-deep, sucking at her legs like quicksand. Every step was agony. Her skin felt like it was being flayed. She aimed for a cluster of rocks in the distance, a dark scar against the white. If she could get out of the wind, maybe she could think. Maybe she could survive. But the wastes were not empty. As she dragged herself forward, a scent hit her nose, faint over the smell of ice, but unmistakable. Musk, rotting meat, blood. Amora froze. She squinted into the tree line. 20 yards away, emerging from the shadows of the pines, were 3 shapes. They were wolves, but not like the majestic shifters of the blood moon. These were ferals, wolves who had lost their human minds to the cold and the madness. Their fur was matted and patchy, exposing raw skin to the elements. Their eyes were milky white, blind but tracking her heat. Yellow saliva dripped from their jaws, freezing into icicles before it hit the ground. They lowered their heads, hackles rising. They didn't see a queen. They saw meat. Amora took a step back, her foot slipping on hidden ice. She fell hard, the breath knocked out of her. The lead feral snarled, a wet, gurgling sound, and bunched its hind legs, preparing to spring. She was weaponless. She was freezing. She was alone. The wolf launched itself into the air. Chapter 8. The Exile. Amora threw her arm up, a pathetic shield against the snapping jaws of the feral. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the tear of flesh. Thwack. A dull, heavy impact echoed through the clearing, followed by a high-pitched yelp. Amora opened her eyes. The feral wolf hadn't reached her. It was lying in the snow 3 feet away, thrashing, a heavy stone embedded in its skull. The other 2 ferals skidded to a halt, confused, sniffing the air. "Ugly bastards, aren't they?" a voice drawled from above. Amora looked up toward the rocky outcrop she had been aiming for. Perched on a ledge, wrapped in mismatched furs and holding a crude sling, was a boy. He couldn't have been older than 17, his face smeared with charcoal and grease, his hair a tangled mess of brown knots. He looked wild, dangerous, and completely unimpressed. He loaded another rock into his sling with practiced ease and whipped it around. Crack. The second stone hit the next wolf in the ribs, breaking bone. The ferals, realizing the prey was guarded, turned tail and scrambled back into the tree line, whimpering. The boy hopped down from the ledge, landing in the deep snow with a grace that suggested he was born in it. He didn't offer Amora a hand. He stood over her, chewing on a pine needle, looking her up and down with critical eyes. "You're the Alpha's new toy, aren't you?" he asked, his voice rough with disuse. "I am the Alpha's mate," Amora corrected, trying to stand up. Her legs gave out and she collapsed back into the snow. The cold was winning. Her vision was tunneling. The boy snorted. "Mate, toy, corpse. Out here it's all the same meat. Name's Rays. And you look like you're about 30 seconds away from the long sleep." He grabbed her by the arm, not gently, and hauled her up. He smelled of wood smoke and old leather, a rogue scent. devoid of any pack allegiance. "Walk," Reyes ordered, dragging her toward a fissure in the rocks. "Unless you want those ferals to come back with their friends." Amora stumbled after him, her feet numb blocks of ice. He led her into a narrow cave entrance, hidden behind a drift of snow. Inside it was small, cramped, but blessedly out of the wind. A small fire burned in the center, fed by dried moss and twigs. Reyes shoved her toward the fire. "Thaw out, but don't get too comfortable. If the Blood Moon patrols find you here, they'll kill me for harboring a stray." Amora huddled as close to the flames as she dared, the heat sending painful pins and needles through her extremities. She looked at Reyes, who was skinning a scrawny rabbit on the other side of the fire. "Why did you save me?" Amora asked, her teeth still chattering. "If you're an exile, you should hate the alphas." "I do," Reyes said flatly, not looking up from his work. "Velkin and Bardolph are better than most, but they still sit on a throne while people like me eat rats in the wastes. But I hate the council more." He looked up then, his eyes sharp and intelligent. "I saw the tracks. I saw the snowmobile that dumped you. It wasn't the alphas. It was Falk's personal guard, the Red Bands." Amora's blood ran cold. "Falk? The general?" "He wants Ravenna on the throne," Reyes said, tossing a piece of raw rabbit meat to a small, shivering creature in the corner. "A fox. Everyone knows it. They didn't send you here to test you, princess. They sent you here to disappear. And if I let you die, they win. I don't like it when they win." "I have to get back," Amora said, struggling to her feet. "If Falk betrayed the twins, Velkin and Bardolph are in danger. They might be drugged too." "You can't get back," Reyes laughed humorlessly. "It's 10 miles to the Citadel. You have no coat, no weapons, and no shift. You're human fragile." "I'm not human," Amora snapped, a growl vibrating in her chest that surprised them both. Reyes paused, his knife hovering over the rabbit. He tilted his head, listening to something Amora couldn't hear. Then his face paled under the grime. "Quiet," Reyes hissed. He kicked snow over the fire, plunging the cave into darkness. "What?" "Hush!" Reyes clamped a hand over her mouth. Outside the cave, the wind had stopped. In the sudden silence, a sound echoed. Heavy, rhythmic thuds. Not footsteps. Hoofbeats. And then, a sound that made the marrow in Amora's bones freeze. The sound of a horn blowing. Low, mournful, and terrifying. "The hunt," Reyes whispered into her ear, his voice trembling. "They didn't just leave you to the cold. They released the Shadow Stalker." Chapter 9. The Silver Awakening. The horn blew again, closer this time. It vibrated through the rock walls of the cave, a sound that triggered a deep, ancestral panic in Amora's brain. "What is a Shadow Stalker?" Amora whispered, pulling Reyes' hand away from her mouth. "Old magic," Reyes replied, grabbing a spear made of sharpened bone from the corner. "A corrupted spirit. Tidwolf used to breed them, but I thought the twins destroyed them all. It tracks fear, it tracks blood, and it eats souls." He looked at her, his expression grim. "It's tracking you. You need to leave. If it finds you here, it kills me too." "I can't fight that," Amora said, panic rising. "Then shift," Reyes yelled, shoving her toward the cave entrance. "You're a wolf. Act like one." "I can't," Amora screamed back, tears of frustration freezing on her cheeks. "It's blocked. The trauma. I can't reach it." Crash. A massive black claw, 3 times the size of a man's hand, smashed through the rock opening of the cave, widening the entrance in a shower of granite dust. A creature squeezed through. It was a monstrosity. It looked like a wolf, but wrong. It stood on 2 legs, 7 feet tall, its body made of shifting shadows and exposed rib bones. Its head was a skull with burning green flame for eyes. Reyes screamed a war cry and lunged with his bone spear. He drove it into the creature's chest. The stalker didn't even flinch. It backhanded Reyes with effortless power, sending the boy flying into the stone wall. Reyes hit with a sickening crunch and crumpled, motionless. "Reyes!" Amora screamed. The stalker turned its burning green gaze on her. It opened its jaws, revealing rows of needle teeth, and let out a hiss that smelled of sulfur and the grave. It took a step toward her. Amora backed up until she hit the cold cave wall. There was nowhere to run. She was going to die here, in a dirty cave, eaten by a monster. Velkin would never know what happened. He would think she failed. He would think she was weak. Weak. The word echoed in her mind. Breeder. Victim. Stray. No. Something inside Amora snapped. It wasn't a mental decision. It was a biological revolt. The wolf inside her, the one she had suppressed with drugs and fear for 3 years, woke up. It didn't wake up gently. It woke up screaming. The pain was blinding. It felt like her bones were being pulverized by a sledgehammer. Amora fell to her knees, screaming as her spine arched and cracked. The stalker paused, confused by the sudden surge of energy. Amora's skin burned. The breeder's mark phantom pain on her shoulder flared white-hot, but this time the heat consumed it. Fur burst through her pores, not the brown or gray of a common wolf, and not the black of the twins. It was silver. Pure, blinding, metallic silver. The transformation was violent and fast. Her muzzle elongated, snapping into place. Her paws expanded, claws tearing through the stone floor. Her human mind receded, replaced by the sharp, crystal-clear focus of the predator. Amora stood up. She was no longer the frightened girl in the nightgown. She was a silver wolf, slightly smaller than the twins, but radiating an aura of ancient, celestial power. The stalker hissed and lunged. Amora didn't dodge. She met the charge. She moved with a speed that blurred the air, ducking under the stalker's claws and snapping her jaws around its throat. Her teeth, reinforced by the alpha blood of her mates, sank into the shadow flesh. She tore. The stalker shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and dissolved into black smoke. Amora didn't stop. She shredded the shadows until nothing remained but a pile of black ash on the cave floor. She stood over the remains, panting, her silver fur glowing in the darkness. She turned to Reyes. The boy was groaning, stirring. He looked up, his eyes widening as he saw the magnificent silver beast standing over him. "Holy," Reyes whispered, coughing blood. "The moon wolf." Amora threw her head back and let out a howl. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a signal. It cut through the storm, carrying over the mountains all the way to the citadel. "I am here. I am alive, and I am coming for you." Outside the cave, the sound of snowmobiles approached. The cavalry had arrived, but were they friends or foes? Chapter 10. The Bloodvetting. The howl shattered the windows of the west tower miles away. It woke the pack. It sent a shiver down the spine of every living thing in the valley. In the frozen clearing outside the cave, headlights cut through the darkness. 3 snowmobiles skidded to a halt. General Falk leaped off the lead machine, his rifle raised. Beside him were 4 red band guards. They had come to collect a body. Falk's face was set in a mask of grim satisfaction. He expected to find a frozen girl, or the leftovers of the shadow stalker. Instead, a massive silver wolf stepped out of the cave entrance. The wolf's fur was so bright it reflected the headlights, blinding the soldiers. Its eyes were pools of liquid mercury, burning with intelligence and rage. It stood protectively over the injured rogue boy, growling a warning that shook the snow from the trees. "Hold fire!" Falk shouted, his voice cracking with shock. He lowered his rifle, staring. By the goddess! Behind the guards, another sound approached, the roar of a high-powered engine. The black luxury sedan from the night before, modified with chains on the tires, smashed through a snowdrift and drifted to a halt. The doors flew open. Velkin and Bardolph stumbled out. They looked terrible, pale, sweating, their movements sluggish as they fought off the remnants of the drug. But when they saw the Silver Wolf, their strength surged back. Amora, Velkin breathed, falling to his knees in the snow. Amora looked at her mates. She wanted to run to them. She wanted to lick their faces and curl up in their warmth. But she couldn't. Not yet. Falk was watching. The pack was watching. She stepped forward, her gaze locking with Falk's. She didn't shift back. She approached the general, her lips pulled back to reveal lethal fangs. She stopped inches from his throat. Falk, the hardened warrior who feared nothing, flinched. He dropped his gaze. He bared his neck. It was a submission. He was acknowledging a superior predator. Amora huffed, a sound of dismissal, and turned to Velkin. She nudged his hand with her wet nose. She passed, Bardolph said, his voice hard as iron as he walked up behind Falk. The trial of ice. She survived the night. She killed a stalker. She shifted. Is there any doubt left, General? Falk looked at the pile of black ash in the cave, then at the Silver Wolf. No doubt, he muttered. But the law is the law. The trial of blood is next. She just killed a stalker, Velkin roared, standing up and gripping Amora's fur. That was blood enough. That was defense, a cold voice cut in. From the back of the convoy, a sleek white sleigh arrived, pulled by 4 white horses. Ravenna sat inside, wrapped in fox furs, looking impeccable and untouched by the cold. She stared at Amora's wolf form with a mixture of hatred and terrified awe. The trial of blood requires a hunt, Ravenna announced, stepping out of the sleigh. A specific hunt. The council has decreed it. Amora growled at her, the sound deep and menacing. Ravenna didn't back down. Though her heart rate spiked, Amora could hear it. What is the target? Bardolph demanded. Ravenna smiled. The white stag of the Elder Woods. It hasn't been caught in 50 years. If she brings its heart to the altar by sundown, she passes. If not, she is exiled. That stag is a myth, Reyes yelled from the cave entrance, clutching his broken ribs. It's a spirit beast. You can't hunt it. Then she will fail, Ravenna shrugged, and the pack will be saved from a weak Luna. Amora looked at the twins. They looked ready to tear Ravenna apart, but they were bound. If they interfered, the trial would be void, and Amora would be executed for heresy. Amora nudged Velkin again. She looked at him with her mercury eyes, projecting a thought as clearly as if she had spoken it. I will do it. She turned away from them, facing the dense, dark forest of the Elder Woods. She didn't need a head start. She launched herself into a run, a silver streak against the white snow, disappearing into the trees to hunt a ghost. Chapter 11. The Hunter and the Hunted. The Elder Woods were different from the wastes. The wastes were dead. The woods were alive and watching. The trees here were ancient, their trunks as wide as houses, their roots twisted into snares. Amora ran. Being a wolf felt like flying. Her senses were dialed up to 11. She could smell the sap in the trees, the mouse under the snow, the ozone of the approaching storm. But she couldn't smell the white stag. She had been running for hours. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, purple shadows across the forest floor. Fatigue was clawing at her muscles. The adrenaline of the shift was wearing off, replaced by the gnawing hunger of the wolf. Focus, she told herself. Find the trail. She slowed to a trot, nose to the ground. There, a faint scent, like ozone and old magic, and a track, a hoof print that glowed faintly blue in the twilight. She followed it. The trail led her deeper, into a ravine filled with sharp rocks. Suddenly, a scent hit her that didn't belong. Perfume. Winter roses and arsenic. Amora skidded to a halt, ears swiveling. From the ridge above, a crossbow bolt sang through the air. It wasn't aimed at a stag. It struck the ground inches from Amora's front paw, exploding in a puff of silver dust. Wolfsbane. Amora yelped as the dust burned her nose and eyes. She scrambled back, coughing, her vision blurring. On the ridge stood Ravenna. She wasn't wearing her furs anymore. She was dressed in white tactical gear, holding a high-tech crossbow. She wasn't here to observe. She was here to ensure the trial failed. "You really thought we'd leave it to chance?" Ravenna called down, reloading the crossbow with a terrifying calmness. "The twins are blind. They think with their—" She laughed. "But I see you, Stray. You're just a disruption." Amora snarled, crouching low. She tried to leap up the ridge, but the wolfsbane was making her dizzy. Her limbs felt heavy. Ravenna aimed again. "This bolt is silver-tipped, right through the eye. I'll tell them the stag gored you. Tragic accident." Amora scrambled behind a boulder as the second bolt shattered against the stone. She was trapped. She couldn't climb the ridge under fire, and the ravine was a dead end. She looked around frantically. The blue, glowing tracks of the stag continued past her, into a dark cave at the end of the ravine. She had a choice: charge Ravenna and die, or run into the lair of the spirit beast. Amora chose the cave. She bolted from cover, ignoring the third arrow that grazed her flank, searing her skin like a hot iron. She dove into the darkness of the cave entrance just as Ravenna fired again. Inside, it was silent. The air was warm, and standing in the center of the cavern, illuminated by bioluminescent moss, was the white stag. It was magnificent. 10 feet tall at the shoulder with antlers that looked like branches of diamond. It looked at Amora with eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. Amora froze. She was supposed to kill this? It felt like a sin. It felt like killing a god. But outside, Ravenna was coming down the ridge. The stag lowered its head. It didn't attack. It huffed. And a cloud of mist formed a shape in the air. A memory? A vision? Amora stepped closer, mesmerized. Suddenly a shadow detached itself from the ceiling of the cave. Not a spirit. A man, dressed in black ninja-like gear, holding a syringe. It was the stag mask figure. He dropped silently behind the stag. Before Amora could bark a warning, he plunged the syringe into the stag's flank. The beast screamed, a sound like shattering glass. Its eyes turned from peaceful blue to blood red. The madness virus. The stag turned on Amora, foaming at the mouth, its diamond antlers lowered like spears. It wasn't a prey animal anymore. It was a killing machine, driven insane by Ravenna's agent. Amora was trapped between a mad god and a hunter with a silver crossbow. Chapter 12. The Mirror of Madness. The corrupted stag charged. The ground shook. Amora threw herself to the left, barely avoiding the diamond antlers that smashed into the cave wall, sending stone shrapnel flying. The beast was fast, unnaturally fast. It spun, hooves lashing out, catching Amora in the ribs. She yelped, tumbling across the stone floor. Pain exploded in her side. She could feel ribs cracking. The stag mask figure stood on a ledge above, watching. He pulled out a radio. "It's done. The beast is rabid. She won't survive." Amora struggled to her feet. Her silver fur was matted with blood. She couldn't kill this thing. It was too strong, too crazy. But she couldn't run. "Trust your wolf," Velkin had said. Amora closed her eyes. She stopped fighting the wolf. She stopped thinking like a human trying to pilot a beast. She became the silver wolf. She sensed the stag's movement before it happened. The shift in weight, the intake of breath. When the stag lunged, Amora went low. She slid under the beast's belly, twisting in midair. She didn't go for the throat. She went for the leg, the hamstring. Snap. The stag crashed down, crippling one leg. It thrashed, screaming, but it couldn't stand. Amora stood over it. She felt a wave of sadness. This creature was a victim, just like her, used by Ravenna, corrupted. She lunged for the throat to end its suffering quickly. One clean bite. The stag shuddered and went still. Amora panted, blood dripping from her muzzle. She looked up at the ledge. The stag mask figure was gone. She grabbed the stag by the scruff. It was impossibly heavy, but the adrenaline gave her strength, and began to drag it. An hour later, the sun was setting. The council was gathered at the altar in the center of the clearing. Skara, Falk, and the twins waited. "She's not coming," Ravenna said, feigning sadness. "The sun is down." "Wait," Velkin said, pointing to the tree line. Amora emerged. She was in human form now, naked but unashamed, wrapped in the bloody hide of the white stag. She dragged the massive heart of the beast behind her, dropping it onto the stone altar with a wet thud. The crowd gasped. She was covered in cuts, bruising, and blood, but she stood tall. "The trial of blood is complete," Amora rasped, her voice raw. Velkin rushed to her, wrapping his cloak around her, checking her wounds. "You did it. Gods, Amora, you did it." "Not yet," Skara said, stepping forward. She looked at the heart, then at Amora. There was a flicker of respect in the old woman's eyes. But it was quickly masked by duty. 2 trials down. 1 remains. "She needs to heal," Bardolph shouted. "Look at her ribs." "The trial of the mind requires no physical strength," Skara said. "It requires truth." She gestured to the altar. A stone basin filled with dark, still water sat there. The moon water. She must drink. It will show her her greatest fears. If she breaks, her mind will be lost forever. If she holds on to her truth, she wakes up a queen. Amora looked at the water. It looked like black oil. "Do it," Amora whispered. "Let's finish this." She stepped away from Velkin. She lifted the basin to her lips and drank. It tasted like tears and ash. Instantly, the world dissolved. The snow vanished. The twins vanished. Amora blinked. She was back in the diner. Louv's diner. It was raining outside. She looked down. She was wearing her uniform. Her hands were scrubbing a plate. "Hurry up, Amora!" Louv yelled. The door chimed. Velkin and Bardolph walked in. But they weren't the men she loved. They were monsters. Their eyes were black pits. They were covered in blood. "There she is," Velkin sneered, pointing a finger at her. "The breeder." "Grab her," Bardolph commanded, pulling out a chain. "Tidwolf paid us well for this one." Amora backed away. "No, this isn't real. You love me." "Love?" Velkin laughed, and it was a sound of pure evil. He vaulted the counter, grabbing her by the throat. "Who could love a stray? We played you, Amora. We needed you to trust us so we could deliver you to the highest bidder." He tightened his grip. Amora couldn't breathe. "No!" she screamed, clawing at his hand. But it felt real. The pain felt real. The betrayal felt real. The diner melted away. Now she was in a cage, a breeding cage, and standing outside, holding the keys, was Ravenna and Velkin. They were holding hands, kissing. "Thank you for bringing her back, my love." Ravenna purred, kissing Velkin. Now we can use her blood to strengthen our own pups. Anything for you, my queen, Velkin replied, looking at Amora with disgust. Amora fell to the floor of the cage, sobbing, her mind fractured. It was all a lie. The rescue, the jacket, the bond. It was all a long con. Give up, a voice whispered in her ear. Let go. It hurts less if you let go. Amora curled into a ball, the darkness closing in. The reality of the vision was overwhelming. She could feel her sanity slipping, sliding away into the dark water. And in the real world, Amora's body collapsed into Velkin's arms, her eyes rolling back in her head, seizing violently as the poison of the mind took hold. Chapter 13. The Shattered Mirror. The cage in Amora's mind was cold, smelling of rust and old blood. Outside the bars, the hallucination of Velkin laughed, a cruel, jagged sound that scraped against her soul. He was holding Ravenna, his hand resting possessively on her waist. You were never anything but a tool, Amora, the false Velkin sneered, his eyes pitch black. Did you really think the kings of the north would mate with a kitchen rat? Amora curled tighter into a ball on the damp straw of the cage floor. Her heart was fracturing. The pain was absolute. It felt real. The rejection felt more tangible than the stone under her cheek. The voice in her head whispered, "Give up. Let the darkness take you. It's easier to sleep than to hurt." The false Velkin stepped closer to the bars, reaching through to grab her hair. "Look at me when I break you." Amora looked up. She stared into his face, the face she loved. But as his hand touched her skin, something jarred. His touch was cold, clammy, dead. She froze. She remembered the alleyway. She remembered the heat of his jacket. She remembered the electric shock of his skin in the diner. Velkin was fire. Velkin was the sun. This thing was ice. "You're cold," Amora whispered. The false Velkin faltered. The illusion flickered like a bad signal on a television screen. "What?" "You're cold," Amora said louder, pushing herself up. "Velkin isn't cold. Even in the snow, he burns." She closed her eyes, shutting out the visual lie, and reached deep into her chest. She searched for the tether, the golden thread that had pulled the twins to her across 3 towns, the bond that defied logic. She found it. It was faint, buried under the sludge of the mind poison, but it was there, and it was screaming. It wasn't screaming in hatred. It was screaming her name in terror. "Amora! Come back! Stay with us!" "You are not him," Amora said, opening her eyes. She stood up. The cage door rattled. "Sit down, dog!" Ravenna shrieked, her beautiful face twisting into a demonic mask. "No," Amora said, calm. "My alphas do not cage me. My alphas gave me a kingdom." She reached out and grabbed the iron bars of the cage. They should have been solid metal. But as she gripped them with the conviction of her truth, they turned to smoke. The false Velkin roared, lunging at her with a knife. Amora didn't flinch. She stepped forward, walking straight through him. He dissolved into mist the moment he touched her. The dungeon dissolved. The darkness shattered like a mirror struck by a hammer. Light blinded her. Amora gasped, her body arching off the stone altar in the real world. Air rushed into her lungs, tasting of snow and pine. "She's back!" Bardolph's voice cracked with relief. Amora blinked, her vision clearing. She was lying on the altar. Velkin was holding her shoulders, his face pale and terrified. Bardolph was gripping her hand so hard it hurt. She looked up at Velkin. His eyes were gold, warm, alive. "You're warm," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. Velkin let out a shuddering breath and pressed his forehead to hers. "I am yours. Always." Skara stepped forward, leaning on her staff. She looked at the basin of black water, which had turned clear as crystal, the sign of a pure truth. "The trial of the mind is past," Skara announced, her voice ringing across the silent clearing. "She has faced her worst fears and broken the illusion. By the laws of the blood moon," she raised her staff, "behold your queen." Chapter 14. The Red Signal. The declaration hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The hundreds of pack members gathered in the clearing dropped to one knee. It was a wave of submission that rippled outward from the altar. They weren't bowing to a stray anymore. They were bowing to the woman who had walked through the wastes, killed a stalker, and mastered her own mind. Amora sat up, her body aching but her spirit soaring. She looked at the sea of bowed heads. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like hiding. She felt like she had finally arrived. "Rise," Amora said, her voice raspy but commanding. The pack stood, but not everyone. To the left of the altar, General Falk remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest. Behind him, the 50 Red Band elite guards stood rigid, their hands hovering over their weapons. And Ravenna was trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so potent it distorted her beautiful features. She stood by the white sleigh, her knuckles white as she gripped the side of the vehicle. "This is a farce," Ravenna spat, her voice cutting through the celebratory mood. "She cheated. The stag was sick. The mind trial was rigged." "Silence," Skara barked, pointing her staff at the blonde woman. "The spirits do not lie, girl. You lost. Accept it with dignity. Or leave." "I will not bow to a street rat," Ravenna screamed, pulling a silver dagger from her belt. "I was promised the throne. My father was promised power." She turned to Falk. "General, do something." Falk looked at Amora, then at the twins. He looked at the pack members who were looking at him with confusion. He knew the law was against him. He knew the spirits were against him. But he also knew that if he backed down now, he and his daughter would be exiled to the wastes. Falk made his choice. He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a flare gun. He didn't aim it at the twins. He aimed it at the sky. Pop. A streak of red phosphorus shot into the twilight, exploding into a crimson star that bathed the clearing in the color of blood. "Kill the Alphas!" Falk roared, drawing his assault rifle. "Purge the weak. The blood moon belongs to the strong." It was a coup. The 50 Red Band guards didn't hesitate. They were loyal to Falk, not the lineage. They drew silver-tipped blades and automatic weapons. "Treason!" Bardolph shouted, shoving Amora behind the altar. "Velkin, protect the queen." Velkin shifted instantly. The massive black wolf materialized in a blur of motion, leaping over the altar to intercept a hail of bullets meant for Amora. He took the rounds in his shoulder, the impact spinning him around, but he didn't fall. He roared, a sound of pure war, and tore into the nearest traitor. Chaos erupted. The regular pack members, unarmed and confused, scrambled for cover. The Red Bands opened fire on their own kin. "Get her to the woods!" Bardolph yelled, shifting into his own wolf form to flank his brother. "I'm not running," Amora screamed, grabbing the ceremonial dagger from the altar. "I am done running." But before she could join the fight, a hand grabbed her hair from behind. Ravenna. Chapter 15. Treason in the Snow. Ravenna yanked Amora backward, throwing her onto the snow-packed ground behind the altar. The blonde woman was strong, trained from birth to be a warrior, and she was fueled by a lifetime of entitlement. "You ruined everything!" Ravenna shrieked, straddling Amora and raising the silver dagger. "I waited 5 years. I did everything right." Amora caught Ravenna's wrist just as the blade descended. The silver burned her skin, but she held on, gritting her teeth. "You didn't wait," Amora grunted, kneeing Ravenna in the stomach. "You plotted." She threw Ravenna off and scrambled to her feet. Around them, the clearing had turned into a battlefield. The snow was turning pink. Velkin and Bardolph were fighting like demons, a whirlwind of black fur and teeth, but they were surrounded. Falk's men had silver nets and tranquilizer darts. They were trying to capture the alphas alive, to execute them publicly later. Skara, the ancient matriarch, was fighting too. The old woman moved with surprising speed, using her weirwood staff to crack the skulls of guards who got too close. "To me!" Skara shouted to the loyal pack members. "Protect the line." Amora looked for a weapon. She saw Falk on the ridge, commanding his troops. He wasn't fighting, he was directing the slaughter. "Focus the fire on the twins," Falk ordered. "Bring them down." Velkin was limping. A silver net had snagged his hind leg, slowing him down. 3 guards were closing in with spears. "No!" Amora screamed. She felt the heat rise in her chest again. Not the fear, the power. The silver wolf. She didn't wait to shift. She let the instinct take over mid-stride. One moment, she was a woman running across the snow. The next, she was a streak of quicksilver. Amora slammed into the 3 guards attacking Velkin. She didn't bite. She used her momentum, bowling them over like pins. She stood over Velkin's tangled form, snarling, her silver fur bristling. She looked like a ghost in the moonlight. The guards hesitated. Attacking the twins was one thing, politics. Attacking the silver wolf, the avatar of the moon goddess, was blasphemy. "She is a monster!" Falk shouted from the ridge, sensing his men's hesitation. "Shoot her! Shoot the beast!" A sniper on the snowmobile adjusted his aim. The red laser dot settled on Amora's silver chest. Thwip. An arrow flew from the tree line, not from Falk's men, from the woods. The sniper gagged, clutching his throat where a crude, bone-tipped arrow had pierced him. He fell off the snowmobile. Rays stepped out of the trees. Behind him were dozens of figures, ragged, dirty, dressed in mismatched furs. The exiles, the rogues of the wastes. "Looks like you guys need some help," Rays yelled, loading another stone into his sling. "For the silver wolf!" The exiles charged. They had no guns, only hate for the council and Falk. They crashed into the flank of the red bands, turning the tide of the battle. Velkin ripped the net off his leg with his teeth. He looked at Amora, his golden eyes burning with pride. He howled, a sound of rallying victory. Bardolph answered him. The twins were free, and now they were angry. Chapter 16. The Judgment of Ice. With the arrival of the exiles, Falk's coup began to crumble. The red bands, realizing they were fighting the alphas, the moon goddess's chosen, and a horde of angry rogues, began to throw down their weapons. "Surrender!" Bardolph roared in his human voice, having shifted back to give the order. He stood amidst the carnage, shirtless and covered in blood, looking like a god of war. "Drop your weapons and you live. Fight and you die." One by one, the red bands dropped their guns. They fell to their knees, hands behind their heads. Falk stood alone on the ridge. His face was pale. He looked at his defeated army, then at the 3 alphas staring him down. "It's over, Falk," Velkin said, stepping forward. "Call off your daughter." Amora turned. Ravenna was standing near the altar, holding Skara hostage. She had the knife pressed to the old woman's throat. Skara looked calm, but she was frail. "Back off!" Ravenna screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I'll kill her. I swear I'll kill the old hag." "Ravenna, stop!" Falk called out, his voice defeated. "We lost." "No!" Ravenna shrieked. "I didn't lose. I am the queen. I am the—" "You are nothing," Amora said, stepping forward in her human form. She had shifted back, ignoring her nakedness, walking with a deadly calm toward the woman who held the knife. You are a spoiled child throwing a tantrum because the world didn't give you what you wanted. One more step and she dies. Ravenna pressed the knife harder. A drop of blood rolled down Scara's neck. Amora didn't stop. She locked eyes with Ravenna. Look at me, Ravenna. Look at what you're doing. You're holding a knife to the woman who raised this pack. Do you think the twins will ever forgive you? Do you think the pack will ever follow you? Ravenna's hand trembled. You wanted to be strong, Amora said softly, stopping 3 feet away. But true strength isn't about taking power. It's about protecting it. Amora extended her hand. Give me the knife, and I will let you live. Ravenna looked at Falk. Her father had dropped his rifle and was kneeling in the snow, head bowed. She looked at Velkin and Bardolph, who were watching with cold, unforgiving eyes. She looked at the pack, who stared at her with disgust. She broke. With a sob, Ravenna dropped the knife. She fell to her knees, burying her face in her hands. Scara pushed the girl away with her staff, straightening her robes. She looked at Amora. That, Scara said, wiping the blood from her neck, was a queen's mercy. I was wrong about you, girl. You are not broken. You are forged. Velkin and Bardolph rushed to Amora, wrapping her in a cloak, checking her for wounds. Are you hurt? Velkin asked, his hands frantic. I'm fine, Amora said, leaning into him. Is it over? Bardolph looked at Falk, then at Ravenna. The fighting is over. The judgment is next. Chapter 17. The Verdict. The sun rose over the Blood Moon Citadel, illuminating a pack that was forever changed. The bodies had been cleared. The wounded were being tended to in the Great Hall. In the courtyard, a tribunal was held. Falk and Ravenna knelt in the center of the cobblestones, bound in iron chains. The 50 red band traitors knelt behind them. Amora sat on a makeshift throne, a heavy oak chair brought out from the keep, flanked by Velkin and Bardolph. Scara stood to the side as the witness. General Falk, Bardolph announced, his voice echoing off the stone walls. You are charged with high treason, attempted murder of the Alphas, and conspiracy with the Shadow Stalkers. How do you plead? Falk looked up. He looked tired. I did what I thought was right for the strength of the North. I pleaded guilty. And you, Ravenna? Velkin asked, his voice colder. Ravenna didn't speak. She just stared at the ground, defeated. The punishment for treason is death, Bardolph stated, drawing his sword. A hush fell over the crowd. Amora stood up. Wait. Bardolph paused. Amora, this is the law. The law created this mess, Amora said. She looked at Falk. He was a great general once, wasn't he? The best, Velkin admitted, before ambition rotted him. And the exiles, Amora said, pointing to Reyes and his ragged group, who were standing awkwardly on the fringes of the crowd. They were cast out because of these laws, because they were deemed weak or inconvenient. She looked at the pack. We have lost enough blood. I am tired of death. I am tired of cages. She turned to Falk. I will not kill you. Death is too easy. You wanted to rule the North? Fine. You will serve it. You and your daughter are stripped of your rank. You are stripped of your titles. You will go to the Wall of the Wastes, and you will rebuild the defenses you let rot. You will answer to Reyes. Falk's eyes widened. To a rogue? To the new captain of the guard, Amora said, nodding at Reyes. The boy's jaw dropped. Reyes saved my life when you tried to end it. He has more honor in his dirt-stained fingers than you have in your entire bloodline. She looked at the red bands. And you. You will work the mines. You will rebuild what you destroyed. You will earn your place back, day by day. She turned to the twins. Is this acceptable? Velkin looked at her with awe. Bardolph sheathed his sword, a slow smile spreading across his face. It is not the old way, Bardolph said, but it is a better way. So ordered, Velkin roared. Falk bowed his head low, touching his forehead to the stones. Thank you, my queen. As the guards led the prisoners away, Skara stepped up to Amora. She took the girl's hand, her grip surprisingly gentle. You have united the pack, the exiles, and the alphas, Skara said. You have done the impossible. Now, there is only one thing left to do. Chapter 18. The Triple Bond. That night, the aurora borealis danced across the sky, ribbons of green and violet painting the snow. The citadel was alive with music and feasting, celebrating the end of the Civil War and the rise of the Silver Queen. But Amora was not in the Great Hall. She was in the master suite of the highest tower, the Alpha's quarters. The room was warm, lit by 100 candles. A massive bed covered in furs dominated the center. Velkin and Bardolph stood by the balcony doors, watching her. They had washed the blood of battle away. They wore loose linen pants, their chests bare, revealing the intricate tattoos of the pack history. Amora stood before them in a gown of white silk. She felt nervous, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. Are you sure? Bardolph asked softly, stepping closer. Once we do this, there is no going back. Our souls will be tied. You will feel everything we feel, our rage, our possessiveness, our love. I have felt it since the diner, Amora said, reaching out to touch his chest. I don't want to go back. I want to stay. Velkin moved behind her, brushing her hair away from her neck. His breath was hot on her skin. We will never cage you, Amora. You are the wind. We are just the mountains that guide you. Mark me, Amora whispered. Make it real. Velkin groaned, a low, primal sound. He kissed the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. Together. Bardolph moved to her front, his eyes locking with hers. Velkin stayed at her back. On the count of 3, Bardolph whispered, leaning down to her other side. 1. Velkin breathed against her skin. 2, Bardolph murmured, his fangs lengthening. 3. They sank their teeth into the junction of her neck and shoulder simultaneously. Pain flared, sharp and blinding, but it was instantly followed by a rush of euphoria so intense Amora gasped. It felt like golden lava pouring into her veins. The barrier between their minds shattered. She felt Velkin's fierce, protective fire. She felt Bardolph's cool, steady devotion. And they felt her resilience, her hope, her love. The bite marks glowed gold, then faded into silver scars that swirled together to form the infinity knot of the triad bond. They pulled back, licking the wounds closed. Amora staggered, drunk on the sensation, and they caught her, sandwiching her between their massive bodies. Mine, Velkin growled, his voice echoing in her mind. Ours, Bardolph corrected, kissing her forehead. Amora looked out the window at the frozen kingdom below. She saw the lights of the exiles' camp mixing with the pack fires. She saw a world that was healing. She had run from a cage in the city, terrified and alone. She had hidden in the grease and the grime, but she hadn't just escaped. She had found the monsters in the dark, and she had tamed them. Amora smiled, closing her eyes as her mates held her tight. I'm home, she whispered into the night, and the wolf inside her, finally safe, finally loved, threw back its head and howled at the moon. A song of victory that would echo in the north for 1,000 years. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey with Amora, Velkin, and Bardolph. It has been such a joy to share their story with you. If you enjoyed this finale and want to see more stories about fated mates and finding home, I would be so grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow. Also, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Amora was right to show mercy to General Falk and Ravenna, or should she have taken a harder path? Let me know your thoughts down below. Until next time, stay safe and keep howling.